history presentation, and we are back with my brother, Pastor Robert Ash. Before we get into our spiel, I just want to say all honors due to the most honorable. Let me stop playing. All honors due to Pastor Steve B. Simpson, First Lady Isella Simpson, the distinguished elders and evangelists, and especially you, the entire congregation. Special salute to my mother-in-law, Al Marie Nesbitt, and mother, Lorraine Simpson, and the best wife on planet Earth, my wife, my queen, Jamila Griffith. With that being said, let's get into this information. My brother, you had some things that you wanted to clear up or shore up, and some other information you wanted to get a family.
Yes, my brother. Hey, Brother Douglas, thank you. And hello, Bethel family. Wanted to clarify actually a couple of things from the previous discussion that my brother and I had. And that is, one is critically important and the other one is very important. The critically important one is that there actually, when it comes to what we could justifiably call the white man's religion, there are two things, actually two flavors of that in the church, in the Black church today. The one is the one that we had discussed before, which is like the racism and Black people aren't capable and that sort of stuff that comes out of the extreme right wing of politics today. And that has, and there are against social justice and so forth. And there, that has made inroads into corners of the church, in some places. But the biggest danger really isn't that, because people, Black people understand what that's about. The other form of what could justifiably call the white man's religion is on the other side, on the far left, where you have an unholy trinity of abortion, homosexuality, and secularism, which is doubting the Bible, doubting the miracles of the Bible, the resurrection of Christ, and doubting sin and heaven and hell and so forth, and the foundational teachings of the church. And that one is actually far more dangerous, because that has been in the Black church from a number of different channels. One of the worst and most unfortunately has been school. A lot of the Black preachers today are coming from secular universities that teach this sort of thing. And unfortunately, it was the more racist side of the seminary world that made Black people and Black preachers feel unwelcome. And so they were welcomed on the other side politically, and have been really kind of influenced by this kind of doctrine. And you see it a lot. So that is the most important. And that's something that we really need to be aware of, because really it's like the devil is doing like a Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson, right? These right-wing barbs at us and denial of social justice, Black Lives Don't Matter, smearing CRT and that sort of stuff. Those are like jabs, right? Those are the devil's jabs. And make no mistake about it, the devil can kill you with a jab. Muhammad Ali's jabs could knock you out. Mike Tyson's jabs could knock you out, right? But that right cross and that uppercut, right, is really from the left wing, and from that portion of it, because that has made the most pervasive inroads into the church. I saw this a lot. Was that when I was in the AME church? I've seen it in the Baptist church as well. And that type of thinking is really damaging to the gospel of Christ, and it mixes in sin with righteousness and makes God's love seem as though it's permissiveness and libertinism. So that's something to be very, very. And that did not originate in the Black church. That's the whole point. This came out of basically white, left-wing, so-called liberal thinking and so forth, and has crept into the Black church, unfortunately, to a much larger degree than we ever should have. And we were so focused on the devil's jabs, right, with these right-wing racists, that we missed that uppercut. We missed the right cross, right? So be very careful about that. There's two forms of the white man's religion, and only one ever really gets talked about. We need to talk about the other one as well, as being that. That's number one. That's the critical one. The important one.
Point. That's an excellent point, excellent observation. Because I saw, and I forget his name, but he's like one of these celebrity pastors or bishops, whatever. He took over Eddie Long's church.
No, okay.
And he was talking about abortion Um, and he was talking about, he went so far as to talk about selling weed on the church grounds. And I was like, whoa, my man is like I, I'm kind of on the fence with the abortion issue. I because just in certain situations, especially, I don't think it should be used as birth control. But other
Yeah, that's really
situations,
what I was referring to more. I'm not
yeah,
talking about ectopic pregnancies that are a danger to the mother where both will die. That's not the case. Most
exactly,
abortions don't fall into that category. They're really,
exactly,
I
and
just
that's
don't want this
important.
baby. Yeah,
That's
right.
important. So,
Yeah,
and
thanks
what
for
so
bringing that up. Mhm.
what was the second one that you
Yeah,
wanted to talk to us about?
no problem. Yeah, thanks for bringing that out. And it's not just him. It's like Ralph Warnock, right? A lot of black pastors have been getting on Ralph Warnock because he supports this. There's a guy that I used to be on his pastoral staff. When I was at AME Church, he's now a pastor of one of the biggest AME churches in the Bay Area, and he's talking about he did a post on Facebook about right wingers coming after bodily autonomy, right, which is a code word used by the pro-abortion forces to try to frame the issue in a way so that the baby gets ignored, right? And so, and really it's a complex issue, and it's complex because of the permanent impact on two people of one person's decision. All right, so that's from a scriptural standpoint, it's very so there's help that needs to be done for young mothers and that kind of stuff, but and we should do that, but to try to just make a blanket statement of God, somehow, and there's people like you see on TV now where these people are on the news about people saying that abortion is God's human, God gave it to it as a human right or something like that. It's paraphrasing what they say. It's just it's scripturally insane. And same thing with accepting any kind of lifestyle. God wants us to be the way, he wants us to come the way we are, but he doesn't want any of us to stay the way we are, right? All of us have to get rid of our sins, whatever they are, heterosexual, homosexual, dishonesty, pride, you name it, it's got to go. All right, so that's number one. And that's part, and that those types of sentiments didn't come from the black community either. They came from like the basically affluent left-wing white people, right? So it's really, so beware of that portion of the white man's religion, because it's making a lot more inroads into the black church than the racists on the right wing side. So we have enemies on both sides, and we need to really defend against on all fronts. And so that's the one. The important thing, that was the critical one. And also, to take the good, like Jesus, like Paul said, to take the good and abhor the evil, right? It said that in Romans. So, cleave to that which is good and abhor the evil, right? So that's what we need to do on either side, and be very discerning. Go on issue by issue basis, topic by topic, not platform by platform or party by party. All right, so that's the critical thing. That's another inroad. The important thing is just to kind of recap what we had discussed, and you said that you had discussed some of these saints as well from the early church, like Tertullian, Origen, Ambrose, Augustine, Perpetual and Felicity, Pachymonius, and a bunch of others that came out of Africa and helped Athanasius, and help form and articulate Christian doctrine, Christian practice, Christian worship, and also Christian, institution or practices like monasticism, for instance, or other. All right, I had said toward the end that if we stay with Protestantism, we're going to lose a great deal of that. And and so we need to kind of at least check out Catholic history, but really we don't even need to do that, because these people, these saints, were not Catholics. They were Orthodox. The Catholic Church didn't form until the 11th century. In the year 1054, there was a great church split in the Church of Rome, which now calls themselves the Catholic Church. They split from the rest of the church and went their own way. And then they started with a core doctrine in terms of the identity of God, procession of the Holy Spirit. That's called the Filioque. And then from there went on to other stuff like papal infallibility, papal. What's the other favorite one? Immaculate Conception, and those sorts of things, and now co-redemptrix and that sort of stuff, right? So indulgences. So and that leaves a big.
Let me ask.
Yeah, and so that leaves.
I wanted to make sure everybody kind of heard what you said. Mm-hmm. And this got to go up on the YouTube channel. The Catholic Church wasn't created till, did you say the 11th century?
Yes, 1054 AD.
And so any ideas or notions about the Catholic Church creating Jesus or Christianity or anything like that would be almost laughed at from an academic, historical, or any factual standpoint whatsoever. Then
that's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that.
Yeah. Now there could be some. There's a bit of confusion that can come around this from a couple of areas, right? One is that there was only one church until 1054, and this church was actually so that's church. Right. Then there were churches. There were 7 main churches, and there were a couple of other ones. There were 7 main churches around the Mediterranean, including like the Church of Rome, Church of Antioch, Alexandria, in Ethiopia, and then there were also churches in Jerusalem, and then there was a church in India. The Apostles of St. Thomas, churches in Persia along that weren't on the Mediterranean at all. All right, so we need to understand, always understand what context we're using the word church. So there was one church from that standpoint, composed of a number of churches that were just basically regions where they had patriarchs and that kind of thing. All right, bishops. And so what happened was that over time, starting at around the 3rd or 4th century, Rome started trying to assert primacy, right? And they did not, or the other churches really didn't accept that, and they were considered like first among equals, like you've got an older brother but you're all part of this family, that type of thing. That maybe has a little more experience in some area, because they really kind of hinged their stuff on Peter being the pastor there, and then they kind of leapfrogged over to Victor and so that they consider the first popes and things like that. So, and then they kind of grandfathered in Peter as being the first pope, which he really wasn't. But anyway, there were the bishops of Rome, of Antioch, Constantinople later on, Alexandria, and others in Jerusalem and so forth. And so around the 800s, starting in the 9th century, the Church of Rome really started trying to demand primacy, right? And they started to try to do sort of single-handed councils for determining and establishing doctrine or not so much doctrines and practices of the church that were either accepted or rejected by the other churches. But they really wanted to they started demanding primacy. Around 1054, it came to a head where the Bishop of Rome and the Patriarch of the Bishop of Constantinople, who's now the Patriarch of Constantinople, that they came together. Rome traveled to Constantinople. They had they were 2 big egos. They had a big fight, and each of them excommunicated the other, right? And so the Church of Rome went on their own way, and the rest of the church went about its own way. And from there, meeting in 1054 is usually called the Great Church Split or the Schism. And from there, the Church of Rome went on its own and started focusing more in the European theater, if you will, the European geography, and spread north and so forth. And then the Orthodox Church spread around the rest of the world. And so that's really how the Catholic Church formed. Now they've got their own versions of this, but really that event is really the defining event that formed what is called today the Catholic Church. So all of the saints that we had been talking about are in Catholic history, and they're a useful repository of information for all of those saints. They will claim them as Catholic saints, but they actually claim all of church history of being, anyway, but really, in reality, historically, these were Orthodox. There was one church. The Church of Rome was one of a number, and so that's really where all of these great thinkers and saints and all of these African saints come from. So, and right now there's over 30 African saints that have days that are celebrated in Orthodoxy. So studying the Orthodox Christianity is a really great way to learn about these saints, from the framework without any of the baggage of the word Catholic being around. Right. So I think and it's important for us to know them. The Catholic Church does have some contributions, like we said, like in, from evangelizing Congo, for instance, and that's where like a lot of Congolese Christians. There was Christianity in Mali and Nigeria before the Europeans. Some Europeans brought some Christianity into Congo. There was some there, but basically, Orthodoxy is really where we can focus without having to fight that fight of get past the word Catholic.
Okay. And that's actually that's really helpful for a lot of people, because you because you get a lot of people say, the Catholic Church started in 325 with Constantine and ecumenical councils, and you know what I mean, or they believe the Catholic Church is the original church.
No,
and
that's because we're in the West, and that's the story we've been told. No, by Catholicism, right? Because where did Protestantism come from? What were we protesting against? Catholics.
Right. Exactly. And because of that, just assume, since they came out of that must have been, that's the standard. And then they broke away because they didn't agree with what that's the narrative. And then we sort of forget, there's always been an Orthodox church. And so I definitely appreciate that breakdown. So let me ask you about this, because talking about, the far left and the far right, are there any far left or far right talking points that you see in our current climate that are detrimental to not just the Black church, but to Black people as a collective, and is kind of helping to push people who are already on the outside of the church sort of further away from maybe being able to come back into the fold, or at least get an understanding to the point where you're able to disagree, respectfully, as opposed to some of the things that you and I see online. Do you think some of the tactics politically from these four from the center factions have played a part in that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really deep question, and the answer is yes. Let's start with the far right, because they're the easiest ones. Is that the whole today, every single thing that I've seen over decades of ministry and before, anything that is intended by Black people to either get rid of some genuine systemic barrier, or to kind of make up for lost time the way that white people have been able to do. And it wasn't just, you spoke, I think, last time about these big land grants, right? These 160 acre and land grants. That wasn't even the most recent. The most, people can say, oh, that was 200 years ago, or whatever. No. In the suburb boom of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, right? White people got cheap houses, cheap loans, and Black people were legally forbidden by the Federal Housing Authority from being sold, or the realtor could lose their license. So they got the biggest jump in generational wealth in world history. Every suburb that we have around there was built, the main suburbs we have were built during that time, and Black people were locked out. They could not get loans. They could not buy houses in those neighborhoods. And white people as a population got cheap houses, cheap loans, and became generational wealth holders that they could pass on to their family, that they could finance their children's education with. And Black people got locked out and remained renters by legal force of the U.S. government. It's the Federal Housing Authority that prevented that, right? So that's one.
And then you're told to put themselves up by their bootstraps while you basically giving these things away to other people. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. And it's the whole lie, the myth of Horatio Alger. There is no such thing as a self-made man or self-made woman. Everybody got a break along the way. It doesn't matter what color you are. Somebody decided that they were going to go with you for their first purchase or pair of shoes or, makeup or life insurance, whatever it was, or job, right? Somebody decided they were going to go with you instead of the 2 other or 3 other or 10 other people who had more experience, but they were willing to take a chance, right? And so that type of favoritism, is that type of hand up, really, it becomes favoritism. But when it's done right, that type of hand up helps everybody. And it doesn't matter if you, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, or whatever, somebody made you rich. Somebody gave you that chance, right? And to say that, it's wrong for somebody that's been denied, not just not given that chance, right? I mean, you're in a job, somebody takes a chance on you. 2 other people didn't get the job, so they have other opportunities. Somebody would take a chance on them. But to be denied the opportunity to even compete, and then when there's some opportunity that says, hey, we need opportunity to compete, and you say, no, you need to be fair and just like us. We earned our way. Yeah. My parents came here.
You got to work for it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Right. My parents came here from Europe, and they didn't have anything, and they started from nothing. First of all, no, they may have started low down on the totem pole, but they didn't have anybody telling them no, looking at them and having a scowl before you even open your mouth to ask for a job or a sale or something like that, right? They didn't have that.
How about they didn't have people who wanted to take a chance with them and were told, if you take a chance with them, you getting cut off from whatever benefits you getting.
Exactly. So, right.
So even the people who wanted to couldn't do it.
Right. That's right. That's a great point. Because if some people, not everybody's a racist, right? So somebody says, hey, this is the Black family, I want to give them a chance anyway. No, you won't. You're going to lose your real estate license, right? So those sorts of things, to pretend that those sorts of things had no impact and no effect on what people are doing, now, it is absolutely outrageous.
Yeah,
and that's being kind.
And it's offensive, and it insults your intelligence. Like I always had this discussion with people about the drug epidemic in our community, and because my uncle pastor, as I call him, has this saying, this is not by osmosis when he's talking about us being here and the things that we see and how the world connects. It's obvious that he's saying that all of these things being connected, it's obvious, it's God's hand at work. It's not by osmosis. And I tell people it's not by osmosis that we find ourselves in the situation we in when we didn't have boats and planes to put drugs in our neighborhood. Like we did. Yeah. And when you see people who are waking up hungry every day, and they see an opportunity, however insidious that opportunity may be, they now can eat after they've been hungry every day of their lives. Mm-hmm. And people who grew up having to share one pair of jeans with 3 pairs of jeans with their siblings, and now they see a way out of that will be 1,000 times better than that, and you're gonna tell them no, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, you set an impossible task in front of people, and I remember I tell people about this all the time. We see these fictional movies that are based on real events. Like we know the mafia had the commission in real life, the 5 families, And so when you watch The Godfather and you see this meeting of these fictional mobsters, but it's the 5 families, and you hear this guy say, when they're talking about drugs, and they say, and he says, in my neighborhood, we'll give it to the coloreds. They're animals anyway, let them lose their soul, as they get into this drug business. And it's like, I'll be doggone, that's exactly what they did. And, and we can see how, and you find out that our president and our vice president, who these conservatives, these super conservatives, as they want to call themselves, hail as almost as a deity. Ronald Reagan was a big part of putting drugs into our neighborhoods.
Yeah,
and so
and making the penalties extremely severe, so that Black people could never so they go to jail easily and can never get out.
Absolutely, and that's what I was about to say next. Think about a system where you supply the drugs, and then you declare a war on the very people who are pushing and using the drugs that you supplied, so that they get they get way more time than their white counterparts, than their counterparts, period.
Yeah.
And they, even though they have an inferior grade of the substance, right? Because crack ain't powder. Like that's just a fact. But you get more time for crack than you did for pure powder cocaine. Yeah. And this was like, we saw this in real time. People would be found with crack cocaine and go away for the rest of their life, and somebody be found with powder and be out the next week. Yeah. And you like, this don't make sense. But when you create the game and you rig the game, you can do whatever you want to do. And it was like nothing. Like, you can't do anything about this. You got pedophiles and rapists getting out before people who got caught with one rock of cocaine,
right,
or one bag of marijuana, and you like, what is going on? And I tell people, if you want to see the contrast in this country with regards to how the white community and the Black community are viewed, when drugs became a major issue in our neighborhood, there was a war declared on drugs. You saw tanks going down the street, going into people's homes, men and women sprawled out like animals on the street, being hunted. The police had carte blanche to beat the hell out of anybody they wanted to. It was a war. Just say no campaigns, all of these things. And when drugs became a major problem in white neighborhoods, it was an epidemic.
Yeah,
treatment centers were erected. Yeah. Let's give them clean needles. I don't remember.
Clean needles. A crisis. It was a crisis. It
was a crisis. Yeah. I don't remember clean crack pipes ever being given out in Berkeley or Kinloch, where I grew up. Yeah. But we see, give these people, they going to people tweaking on the street and giving them clean needles to shoot up with.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And they have rooms where they can come and shoot up and go. Clean needle. It's absolutely disgraceful.
It's in real time in our face. Yeah. That's the difference between Black and white in this country. And so we understand why it's so polarizing. And I said something this past Sunday at church. Like, the Human Genome Project showed that, like, a white woman with red hair and green eyes was closer genetically to a Black man with black hair and brown eyes than she was a white man with the same color hair and eyes as she was. In this pool of thousands of different people of different backgrounds, ethnic groups, and things like that. And the reason for that is, at our base level, we are all connected and related to each other on a human basis. And so it's only one race. Like, and I always say this when I'm O positive, and so I get a lot of calls to donate blood. And so I'm sitting here donating blood, and I'm looking around thinking, like, if somebody need my blood, they don't care what color I am.
Yeah.
If they needed my lung, they wouldn't care. Like I can't think of one person. I love to see a study on the percentage of people who find out the color or the race or the organ donor or the person they're getting it from and decide they don't want it. Like I look, and their life is actually on the line, or their child or their spouse. I love to see the percentage of people who say, "Well, no, don't give my wife that heart from that black woman."
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So, because we are all human, and we let a bunch of races who claim to be Christian, because I don't think they were, they claim to be Christian. We let them make these social constructs right here on the shores of what would become the United States. They came up with this concept of who was black and who was white, and we still in 2023 perpetuate that madness, and it's crazy. So you dealt with the right wing side of how these politics have sort of furthered the schism between the church and those on the outside of it. How does the left wing play a part in it?
What they do is the left wing, how can I say this? Kidnaps terminology and concepts and hijacks. That's a better word. Okay, that's the word I was looking for. The left wing hijacks legitimate concepts and repurposes them for their own selfish ends. All right, so starting in now 19, we'll take a couple of different, two, and possibly, hopefully not, but two examples. One is back in the 1960s, 1970s, there was the term liberal, right? And people who were white and were liberal were going into the South on voter drives. They were getting thrown in jail and killed, hunted down and killed, right? And so these were people that were called liberal. They wanted to free slaves before then. They wanted to end Jim Crow, right? And that was the definition of liberal. All right, and that's the classic definition. So in the late 60s, especially like starting in, one of the events was really Woodstock, like 1968, and 400,000 hippies gathered in a giant field in New York somewhere upstate. So that gave a signal, and what happened was that from then into the 1970s and later, these people began to mix in drugs, sex, and rock and roll with civil rights, right? And so the word liberal became they kept the same facade of civil rights, but then in the back end, what they were really doing was, introducing, sex with whom you want to, homosexuality, abortion,
sexual revolution, and all of
so-called sexual revolution, all of that became so-called liberal, and they kept lip service to civil rights, but they never acted on it, and they still do that today. And that is why that is why since then, like since the late 60s, maybe early 70s, but certainly late 60s, there's not been a major civil rights bill passed, period. There is no anti-lynching laws. If that happened, I don't recall if that happened. It just happened a couple of years ago. If it happened, it may not even be there today. There is no police reform. There is no redlining reform. There is no reparations, right? No end of redlining and zoning and school funding, so that poor people have to fund their own schools and rich people fund theirs instead of getting education. This country has decided to import talent, and yes, they should import talent. America's an opportunity for everybody, but they do that instead of educating people here, right? So we could have a lot of Black Silicon Valley engineers. We could have a lot of Wall Street financials and whatever else that we have, right? A lot more if that education had been, if we'd done like India or Sri Lanka, where they said, look, these people are well, low caste, they're untouchables. But hey, I want to, we need to be a technical powerhouse. So fine, educate them too. Sri Lanka did the same thing, right? And so India became this huge technology powerhouse, and because they educated at every level, they put STEM from the lowest regarded neighborhoods to the highest regarded neighborhoods, and that made that nation great. And the United States had the chance to do it, and they didn't. And so what liberals do on the far right, they're open about it. We don't want you. They'll smear, CRT and that sort of stuff. But what real liberals do on the far left is that they give lip service to civil rights and lip service. But when you see the laws they pass, the things they go to the mat for, it's always going to be things that benefit wealthy white people. Abortion, for instance, white women have more abortions than all other races combined. It used to be 2/3 of white women were 2/3 of abortions were white, upper to middle to upper middle class, age 16 to 20, unmarried, previous births.
Pastor Rob, I got to stop you because my brother Captain K of ISUPK says that Black women abort more babies than anybody else.
No, that's not true. What they've done is now on a per capita basis, yes, the abortion rate is higher among Black women, but the actual number of abortions is higher among white women. If you tally up the actual numbers, and you can go research this, like Kaiser Permanente, most of these figures aren't really tracked anymore because these things are kind of coming out. And so, but it's still like Kaiser Permanente, for instance, you can see their breakdown in demographics. It's going to be 51% of Kaiser abortions are white women, right? So that's the and he's right in terms of abortion rate, okay, but in terms of actual raw number, it's white women, and that is and certainly from the 80s to through the 90s, that statistic was very, very consistent. It would be reported in the Wall Street Journal, and it would be reported by the CDC. Nowadays it's not anymore for some reason, but basically it's white, middle to upper middle class, age 16 to 24, unmarried, no previous births. That was 2/3 of all abortions. Okay, so when they put all those posters on the buildings and on the thing with all these Black women, with the tummy sticking out, and help this poor woman, or Hispanic women, help this poor woman, don't force her to raise a child, that sort of stuff. Those weren't the people having the most abortions. Right. And so that's one thing. And then same thing. And if you look at the priorities in terms of where they go to the mat, they threatened to shut down the state economy of Idaho because they were passing this anti-abortion bill, right? California passed Prop 209, which banned affirmative action in the UC campus, in the University of California system-wide. All they did was put a few token, we hate this, blurbs in the newspaper. If they had, for the University of California system, if they had said, we're going to stop abortions in all of and all of University of California, or we're going to stop, having, gay studies or whatever it was, whatever they do, in that area, we were going to stop offering those classes. They would have shut that school down within 24 hours, the entire school end to end, right? But when it's us, right, and those these call themselves liberals, right? But when it's Black people being denied entrance to the University of California because there's no more allowance made for their circumstances, because they didn't have new textbooks in their schools, they didn't have schools that had advanced placement courses and all of that, right? But they take that into consideration, say this person still can make it here, right? When it comes to that, they didn't do a whisper, barely a whisper. And you look at it today, the stuff that, and don't look at the red, Eric. Look at where they put their dollars. Look at where they put their push. Look at where they go to the mat. We will die trying to get this. It's never anything for Black people, never.
Yep.
They had they tried to pass, to their credit, a police reform bill first year of Joe Biden's presidency. It failed. Where's the big brouhaha? Where's the big nationwide protests? Where's the shutdown of the federal government? Where is it?
Yeah, exactly. The executive order. Because
yeah, exactly right. Where's the executive order? Good point. Great point.
I say, listen, like when it comes to Joe Biden, it's funny to me that a man who signed the crime bill that we were just talking about, where black people got exorbitant more amounts of time than they count their counterparts of any race. Mm-hmm. This same man who knew about what Ronald Reagan, Oliver North, and George Bush were involved in with regards to pushing these drugs in our neighborhood, gets on a black radio show and has the nerve to say, "You ain't black if you don't vote for me."
Yeah,
like the temerity of this individual, but like you said, because of those strategies that they employ, some of us get conditioned to just go along with a particular vote because it's another word that I know you probably it's been co-opted. Didn't start off with them, but it's been co-opted because we want to seem woke. Right.
And that's, and that I in my opinion, I just use hijacked. It was plain out hijacked. Right. And I'm not saying that people like the Joe Biden's plan for Black America is phenomenal. It's really well thought through. Trump put out one too, but it's a bunch of bullet points and it's more individualistic. Joe Biden's is more systemic, societal, and it's a better, plan altogether. But at the end of the day, you're right. Where was the executive order? But then the Dobbs decision passed, and what happened? All hands on deck. Get abortion back. Right. And they had all these black front women on the news, bodily autonomy, blah, blah, blah. Right. And they put all those black people in front. And who were just like they did when they before the Roe v. Wade and all that stuff, make abortion illegal. Right. They went to the mat. They say it in every speech, that they give. Right. They went to the mat for this, and they are not going to stop until they get something. They're doing statewide, state by state canvassing and law passing and all of that stuff.
They're going up in churches saying that. I was like, man, this is heavy right here.
It's spiritually bizarre. Yeah, it's spiritually bizarre. And but when it comes to police reform, Tyree Nichols just being murdered like that, George Floyd passed like, they could have put that same effort into that law too, and they don't, because it's lip service. It is lip service. And so we have active enemies on the right that, and the only difference that I see is that every once in a while they will, the left wing will pass laws to make things easier for workers, easier for black people, easier for women, stuff like that, right? So I can't, you can't completely count them out. But really the real choice that we have right now politically is a couple slices or no bread at all. Right. Yeah. When it comes to our issues, the left wing puts us straight at the back of the bus. Their number one issues are abortion, homosexuality, keeping, the Bible out of everything in society, women, which is predominantly white women, because they used to talk about diversity in boardrooms in terms of, everyone's listened to financial news a lot for a long time. And so they used to talk about diversity in terms of getting more black people, black women, black men, blah, blah, into boardrooms. Then they started changing the things they talk to and now starting to get more women on boardrooms. And what does women mean? Does it mean black women?
White women.
Right. Yeah, that's the kind of blanket. And of course, the rising tide floats all ships, right? So there's going to be some women of color, and there are that have made it, right? Men of color and so forth. But the real focus, is always being co-opted. Another thing too is more recently, the term that you were, referring to was woke, right? What does woke mean? Woke used to mean in the black community that we are aware of racial oppression and that we need to get out of this mindset of accepting this and to tear down and to make us aware of racial oppression and also of the vast contributions that black people have made throughout human history, starting in Africa, here in the United States. All of that was woke. Now, then then again, the left wing started getting involved, and now what is it? Woke is, you know, LGBTQ and, you know, rights
Fact.
and all this stuff and everything, right? They've completely co-opted and hijacked that term and used it for their own purposes again, right? And so that's my fear with CRT, you know, except that,
And you know, I didn't even realize that until a couple of years ago. It was like LGBTQ celebrity was talking about they were now wanting to be called a man and all of that, and it was like her woke speech, and I was like, what? This was like 2 years ago. I didn't even know they were using that. I was like,
yeah,
that was woke.
yeah,
It's a trip. It's a trip.
yeah. And the thing is that both sides, right, the right wing and the left wing, they cooperate in this, you know, and what they'll do is, it started, you know, unfortunately with the right wing, that they used to and still do put together, you know, black people's rights with homosexuals, with premarital sex, with, you know, every kind of thing you could imagine, you know, abortion, everything else, right, and mix in ethnic minorities' rights with those issues. You know, they're going to be doing this and, you know, the next and this, blah, blah, blah. Right. And what happened was that the left wing took advantage of that. And they said, aha. So, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to stand up, you know, initially for black people's rights. But then the new ones will say, well, we'll mouth black people's rights and say, look, do you want to be like those guys, you know, over there? You want to be like those people over there, those sheet wearing, you know, pointy head KKKs over there. And no, but, you know, we're the alternative, you know, you can, you know, but then they're going to give you this whole soup of stuff, and only one of which is black people. And we're like number 6 priority on the list, right?
If 6, yeah.
If 6, right. So there's, you know, abortion, homosexuality, there's secularism, there's, quote, women, and then there's the environment, which they've done good things about. You know, that really is, you know, taking care of God's earth. And then after that, if there's anything left over, it's minorities.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And the things they go to the mat for.
They pit minorities against each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Basically, they throw bread in the cage and watch us fight over it. You know, it's like, because they don't want black and brown getting along. They don't want Asians and African. It's yeah. Let me ask you this, because we coming up on almost an hour. Let me bring it back home. So now, how do all of these things, that soup, that each one of these roots, how does that push people out of the church, and those who are on the outside, how does that keep them from being able to come back in with regards to the black church?
Okay, I think I kind of think of it a little differently, in that the racist right wing does influence black people, say, leaving the black church, right? Because they see, especially when they see black Christians adopting that mindset and start speaking out against Black Lives Matter or CRT, and don't even give it the respect of saying this is a good idea, you know, but it may be, you know, we need to implement a little differently, or these people, like these, you know, the Black Lives Matter organization is a wreck, right? They're a moral mess. But, you know, so let's reject the organization and take the cause and support it, right? We should do at least that. And when black Christians don't do that, then that, I believe, is a turnoff. In terms of the left wing, it's really more of two things that are happening. One is that the left wing, the far left wing, does try to associate the church with this racism, and they also kind of package the deal with, look, you know, come with us out of the church so we can support you. We'll support your civil rights, you know, because they don't mention the fact that the black church actually did all of this stuff. Of course, they don't mention that, but, you know, and then you help us support this lifestyle and that practice and this sort of thing, right? And so that pulls people out because they are speaking against the parts of the Bible that are, you know, that deal with individual personal morality, right? Whereas so that's one way they do it. Another thing that's even worse, though, I don't know if it's even worse or not. Another thing that is very bad, I'll put it this way, is that they influence by giving sort of like these poison pills. Like, you've got schools like, all of the big secular seminaries, Harvard, Yale, and then, some union seminary, but Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and all of those are all very secular, and they go in this leftward direction in the bad part of the left. There's good parts of the left too, right? Which is the whole, ecology or environment, racial minorities, rights for women, children, human rights, those sorts of things, right? I mean, that is really good, and we should support that. But what they'll do is that they'll kind of say, hey, and then they'll mix up some stuff in those seminaries. Well, the Bible wasn't really written by Moses. It was like 500 years later. Right. And then they put forth this false narrative of Bible history, and they've got these very prestigious institutions and degrees behind it, and that pulls people away. And then also the whole focus on holiness, on holy living, on righteousness, right? And case in point, there was a guy, I went to this school, and I was at Stanford. There was a Black Baptist church near the university campus that I went to about half a dozen times before I stopped going. This guy was an amazing exhortational speaker. I mean, you leave out of there feeling good. But I noticed that he never, ever said the word sin. He never talked about heaven or hell. He never talked about repent and turn away from sin. He never talked about Jesus Christ rising from the dead. But especially things like heaven, hell, sin, repent. He only said the word wrong one time in 6 sermons, and that was about reactionary conservatism, right? So basically, he preached this the times that I was there. I don't know what he did before or since, but everything that I saw there was this like watered down, me-centered gospel. It's centered on me and what I want to do. And it's centered on me feeling good and what God does for me and how God helps me in my life right now. And it's not like what I have to give up for God, what I have to turn away from, the sacrifices I have to make to follow Jesus Christ, the things I have to repent from and change about myself. Right. And so
motivational speaking as opposed to,
gospel preaching, right? Exactly. Nothing about salvation. He said, and what he would do, his little catch line at the end was, when after he wrapped up the sermon, and the last words, whatever was, you can all go to heaven if you live right. No, you can't. First of all, you can't live right.
It ain't that.
And then secondly, you need Jesus. You need to repent of your sins. And so that sort of influence, and I saw this when I was in the churches that I have seen that have been pastored by, I don't want to call out any denomination, but basically that I noticed that, that among those churches where you have pastors from these types of schools, that you hear a lot of social preaching, a lot of what they call Black liberation theology, and so forth. And Black liberation theology is actually a takeoff on liberation theology from South America, kind of modified for the U.S. Black experience. But basically, it's really a very me-centered doctrine. It's a very now-centered doctrine. And that's not what Jesus really is emphasizing, because most people that are poor will die poor, right? Most people, it's what Jesus gives us, whatever our station in life, is hope for eternity. And yes, he'll bless us here. And yes, he wants us to do well here. And yes, he protects us here. But it's not all about me and my protection, right? The early churches were martyred, right? They got tortured, murdered, drug out, they had to sacrifice things. They had to turn away. Their families rejected them. Right now in India, or Saudi Arabia, you can be killed if you're a Muslim converting. They'll behead you, if you're, in India, your family would reject you. If you're in Israel, your Jewish family, or even here in the United States, they'll kick you out. You're not our family anymore, right? You will lose everything. Those sorts of things don't have to be the focus of every single sermon. You don't have to preach about hellfire and brimstone 24 hours a day. But if those things never come in to the message, that sacrifice, then it becomes a very me-centered message. And that's really the sort of the Laodicean, mindset that sort of infiltrated a lot of the church. Is that that's something we have to guard against. We have to be encouraging, and yes, deal with the problems of today, but never forget about eternity. Never forget about the resurrection, about the cross, what Jesus Christ died for us to accomplish, our salvation. Because if we strive for what we can get here and strive for justice here, yes, but whatever is lacking, or if we never get it, we have a home for eternity, and that is the real message of the gospel. That's the eternal hope Jesus gave us and gives us.
Yeah, it's kind of, I know what you mean. Like when you say, you hear certain people say, because I remember I listened to a couple of Voddie Baucham sermons, and I was like, man, this guy is, and then I heard him say MLK was a Marxist and a communist, and he didn't have sound doctrine and this and that. I was like, what? And it just, and I was, and he was saying it surrounded by like white pastors and this, and I'm like, because it was like MLK 50 is when they all had kind of this conference to basically rebuke MLK, and I'm like, what is going on? And I was like, oh yeah, you know what? Just like you said, people do. I was like, yeah, ain't no way I'm going back to this stuff, because that was kind of my mindset. Like that was another brick in that wall. Because I was like, what are they saying about Dr. King? But it's like, what are you talking about? But yeah, it's crazy out here. Yeah, we can talk about this all day. But
yeah.
But family, I hope you got some info. I'm gonna break this down into two parts. That first part, which was a continuation of our first conversation, and then the second part where we sort of talked about how these political factions have sort of played like a divider within the black church community, and sort of pushed apart certain people and the church, and created dividing lines, so to speak, and barriers that some of us are finding hard to get past because of the political rhetoric, the co-opting of black terms, and sort of the whitewashing of the black church's role in our fight for justice in this country. And so a lot of good information, my brother. I definitely appreciate it. We got a great sister by the name of Nefertiti up tomorrow, so she will be adding to this conversation. So I think it's been a good Black History Month, and we're gonna try to keep it going. So, brother, let the Bethel family know where they can find you on social media with regards to TikTok, YouTube, and all of that, and we will get out of here.
Yeah, thank you, and blessing to be here and to share, again, and share thoughts. And I'm Robert Ash, and on the channels are both called the Thinkers Bible. So I'm at the Thinkers Bible I'm the Thinkers Bible on YouTube and the Thinkers Bible on TikTok, both of them. Please stop by, and God bless you.
Yeah, please support the brother. Like I said, a lot of good information, and then just some things that you may not have clarity on. He takes his time and really tries to provide clarity on particular biblical questions. So well put together videos, does an excellent job. Really good brother. I can hit him up with something off the top of my head, and he'll try his best to come through for me with regards to answering my questions. So definitely support him. And again, great information. We probably try to get you back next year, and all of that. And we'll definitely be getting you on the channel again soon. So Bethel, has been another installment of the 2023 Black History presentation. We will be back at it again. This has been Pastor Robert Ash, your brother DMG the poet. We are out of here. Until next time.
God bless. Peace.